So knobs versus buttons. It's something that you might not think about being too controversial, but with all the goggles out there on the market today, there's so many different UIs to choose from. And honestly, sometimes the classics are the best. In this case, we're looking at the Steele Industries Nighthawk, and as you can see, it uses knob controls. So in today's video, let's take a look at the differences between the two operating mechanisms and why you might want to choose one over the other. So Steele Industries is a night vision builder and retailer out in Florida in the States. This is going to be their first foray into the binocular night vision market. Now the binocular market, if you don't already know, is quite saturated. There's going to be lots of binos out there, and in order to stand out, you kind of have to make your goggle a little bit special. And I think Steele did this in a bit of a sneaky way. The first thing is going to be its simple, conventional design. This guy is packed with features and has every feature that most people want and nothing that people would discard. Another thing it has going for it is it's going to be constructed primarily out of 70-75 aluminum. This goggle's crazy tough. There's a video out there, I believe on Instagram, of Dom taking this thing and dropping it from various different angles, and it's totally fine. So any realistic environment you use this goggle in, this goggle will survive no problem. The last thing that I think that makes this goggle really, really unique is going to be its implementation of conventional controls, which is something that not every goggle on the market does in the year 2025. This goggle uses knob controls, and these controls are very familiar to the PVS-14. As you can see, there's a knob here for the on-off and IR switch, and there's a knob here for the gain or the brightness control of your tubes. And I believe this was done very intentionally. A lot of new goggles out there are trying to kind of change the way that we use controls, but the PVS-14 controls are tried, true, and tested. And for a lot of these professional users, sticking with conventional controls means less time training with the goggle and more time using it because it's familiar. Now, the other type of way to operate night vision devices is going to be using buttons. And I have here a 1431. So the 1431, the way that it operates is it has this kind of knob/button control. You press and hold this for a few seconds and it turns on, and then you double tap it, I believe, for IR, and then you can turn it over here to adjust your gain. This might seem more simple than this, but in some ways it actually isn't. So the first advantage that I think knob controls have is going to be tactility, or the feel, right? This button over here, there's no detent, there's no stops, there's nothing else. It's just a button. It feels kind of like really any button that you are used to pressing, like on a controller or something like that, maybe a little bit stiffer. And the problem with the button on these 31 based goggles is that I've actually had this goggle turn on in some pouches that don't really have a hard lining. Like the pouch folds in on it, you're taking a prone or something, it presses and holds, and it turns on. Now, it's unlikely to actually damage the tubes if it's in a pouch, but one thing that does is drain your batteries. And if you're actually using the thing, that's not going to be good. And I know some of you guys are saying, well, you should take your batteries out. That's true for storage, but if you're actually deploying them, you can have your batteries in, no problem. Probably should if you're actually going to be using them. So that's one negative about button controls, is sometimes you don't know if the goggle is on or off when it's in your pouch. That isn't so much of a problem with a lot of newer kind of designs, such as some of AB's stuff, like the RP&VG or a lot of the Nocturne stuff. Their buttons are a lot more guarded. They have guards around them. There's no really way to press them without really being intentional about it. But for a button that's proud, which means it sticks out, like the 31 base systems, this is going to be a bit of a problem over here. As you can see, it sticks out quite a bit. Knobs don't really have that problem because there's no really way to press this. You have to really intentionally turn it to turn this guy on or off. So when you're wearing this goggle on your head, you don't know if the goggle is on or off. So let's say these are out of your view, they're on your head over here. The only way to tell if they're on or off is to actually put them down and to look through them. Oh, they're on. I forgot to turn them off, and then turn them off and then flip them up. That's not often the best thing to do, especially if you're in a situation where you need to do things quickly. What I really like about knob control goggles is that you can flip them up, and all you need to do is put your finger on the knob and you can literally feel if the goggle is on or off based on the switch position. Basically, if it doesn't turn anymore to that side where it's off, it's off. You can rest assured it's off. Additionally, this goggle does feature individual pod shut off. So if you roll it up, the individual pods shut off. So that acts as a bit of a safeguard against signature reduction and against damaging your tubes. When it comes to IR illuminator, what I don't really like about goggles that kind of have this one button operation is you have to memorize a certain amount of presses, or if you press it accidentally a few times or something like that, the IR illuminator can accidentally come on pretty easily, and sometimes you can't even see that unless you're in a close range scenario. Yeah, you can look at your light pipe, but like I said, if these goggles are on your head, you could have the eye illuminator blasting. It's just not as tactile. There's just more mistakes, in my opinion, that can happen when you have a control that is trying to oversimplify things a little bit too much. With this guy, you're gonna have to pull and twist to turn the eye illuminator on. It's actually a little bit hard to do, and I think that's a good thing, so that way you don't accidentally ND your eye illuminator, which I've seen happen on a lot of systems. So here's your power operation knob. This is gonna be off. You can't really turn it counterclockwise anymore than it's already turned. Turn it once, it's gonna be on, and then you turn it again for IR, and that's kind of a momentary IR, and if you wanna do constant IR, you pull it, and then you twist it like so, and now you have it on constant IR. The eye illuminator is gonna be beaming until you put it back on, where the eye illuminator is off, the tubes are on, and then you can put it on off. This over here is gonna be your gain knob, just like a 14, but I think it's actually a little bit nicer. So it's not as hard to adjust as a 14 gain knob, which is a common complaint with the 14. It's a little bit easier to adjust, but that doesn't mean that if you like knock it accidentally, it's gonna turn. What's also nice about it, it has these little micro detents. It's really hard to describe, but it's almost like there's these little like ball bearings inside of it that give it a bit of a tactile response, which is, again, really, really nice. Now, a lot of modern goggles do have gain memory, but again, this knob spins infinitely, right? So you're not gonna actually know what level your gain is on unless you memorize it from its last power state. You might actually have to adjust your gain level after turning the goggle on, versus this guy, you can kind of adjust it before you do that and then turn your goggle on, and it's exactly the level you want. And then one last thing that isn't talked about as much is going to be the illuminator usage. So for this guy, it's gonna be a double tap to turn the illuminator on, which is fine, it works great, there's no real issues with it. But the PVS-14 illuminator knob was designed this way for two things. One reason was to prevent eye illuminator NDs. Totally fair. The other reason it was made to kind of spring back and forth this momentary system was for signaling, a bit of an old school technique, but it works really well. So if you're out there with your teammates or whatever, you can actually use this eye illuminator, toggle it back and forth, and signal, super useful. Whereas this guy, if you played anything with toggle controls, you know how annoying he'd be to kind of toggle button presses to make any kind of signal or anything like that. Where this, if you do want to do any Morse code stuff, it's way, way easier than doing it with this guy. So that's really all the advantages of knob controls, and there are a lot. Now, button controls do have some advantages too. Overall, they're gonna be a little bit lighter. They're also going to be a bit more durable. Now, that isn't really the case with the 1431 and other buttons that really sit farther, but newer goggles, such as a lot of the Nocturne stuff, some of the AB stuff, their buttons are a lot more recessed within the housing, so if you do drop the housing, chances are you're not going to damage any of the operations of the goggle. Knobs, by the nature of their design, have to stick out in order for you to use them, and they're going to be a little bit less durable because of that. And you've probably seen some broken PVS-14 knobs out there. If you do drop goggles on the knob, it's unlikely, but it can happen, chances are that knob might not fare very well. I don't think that's as big of a problem on the Nighthawk because the knobs are pretty small, and they're also going to be protected by the lenses sticking out and this dovetail over here, so it's pretty unlikely it's going to land like on the button directly. But if it does, Steele does have you covered with a lifetime warranty on their housing, so I'm sure things will be fine in that regard. So let's get into the other features of this housing and why I like it so much. And we're gonna go from front to back on this as we do on our standard goggle overviews. So on the front of this goggle, you see this guy has some Noctis mil-spec lenses on it. It takes any 14 style lens system, so if you wanna put some NVD ends on it, which I do recommend for this goggle because this goggle is metal, it's a little bit heavier, NVD ends are gonna be a great way to lighten this goggle. It also works with boom slangs and all the other various infinite amount of PVS-14 optics out there. And here I am comparing it to the 1431, and as you can see, this guy weighs 500 and I believe that says 94 grams. And these guys are using different lenses here, but these lenses are gonna be of comparable weight. And the Nighthawk actually weighs a little bit less at 574. So it's kind of awesome how they made an aluminum goggle weigh less than some plastic goggles out there. We'll put the weights up there and some caption over here. And you can see this guy is actually a very manageable weight. Not ultra light by any standards, but not ultra heavy too. Middle of the pack, and it does well for the amount of features that it carries. Like most modern goggles, it's also going to use a D-ring stop, which means that it integrates some parts of the infinity collar and the stop on the inside of the lens so that this lens does not fly out when you adjust it out all the way, and it also stops right at infinity if set properly by a good builder. For those of you guys who are quartermasters, for my duty guys out there, this does make the goggle a lot easier to service. Moving on to the side, full aluminum construction on the side. As you can see, what's really nice in terms of design that Steele did was they actually made the pod topper over here a little bit taller. This guy is compatible with 1160 tubes. It's also compatible with 11769 tubes, which means that it can be using pigtail tubes or 3-pad tubes if you know how to wire them properly, or 2-pad tubes if you want to disable the manual gain for whatever reason. They added a little bit more room over here, so your wiring has a little bit more room. It doesn't get as squished, which is really nice. Here's going to be your IPD stop. It's a very conventional IPD stop that you guys have seen on many goggles. And what that does is it stops the goggle right where your eyes are, and you guys can twist this in and out. So if you guys have, let's say, a Pinhead Larry kind of shaped face, you can really make the pods basically almost touch each other. Or if you guys are big, wide, Hey Arnold boys, you can screw them all the way in, and then the pods almost sit at like a 45 degrees. So lots of options for ergonomics in that way. Moving on to the rear, again, same standard rear PVS 14 glass, nothing too special there. And you've also got your retention points over here, which are on the bridge and not on the pods, which is awesome because I've seen goggles that have retention points on the pods. And sometimes if you have retention on it, it can hike the tube up or down depending on the tension of your retention. Having them on the bridge just makes it much simpler. There's nothing really critical there. It actually can pull the goggle a little bit closer to your face, tighten up the mounting interface, all that good stuff. So if you do want to adjust the tension of the tubes for whatever reason, this has been done out of factory, whether you get it from Steele or from us. There's going to be screws here that you do that with. It presses these two kind of tabs in to make the goggle feel tighter or looser in its articulation depending on your preference. It should be adjusted out of box. You shouldn't need to do that. As you can see over here, it's going to take one CR123 battery. That will give you about 20 to 25 hours of battery life. Pretty standard for most binos. It uses a very standard dovetail mounting interface on top. There are some key improvements here to the external power port position versus other, I will say, kind of legacy BNVD systems. And that's going to be it's kicked out to the rear. So I actually have some cables here. This guy uses a 4-pin LEMO, much like a lot of aviation goggles, AB goggles out there. And it sticks in here on this indexing pin like that. And what's nice about having it kicked to the rear is, as you can see, you get full articulation range with the goggle regardless of the cable's positioning, because the cable doesn't touch the tube, which is great. This is going to be in contrast to 31-based systems, which have it kicked out to the side. And these guys use a Fisher port. I'll put that out there. Now these work totally fine, but as you can see, this tube articulates way further than this tube, which just kind of articulates, to its 180 position. This tube can go all the way up. But I'll tell you this much, the more you can move the pods of a goggle up, especially when they're stowed, the less perceived weight you'll feel on your head when the goggle is stowed, making it a lot more comfortable to use. So that was really smart of Steele to move the cable positioning to the back instead of towards the side. So all that being said, is this going to be the goggle for you? For all my LE and mill guys out there, if you guys are looking for a bino to consider for your next options, I believe this guy is a really great contender, especially if your team is already used to using legacy systems like a PVS 15 or 14. Because of the familiarity with the controls and its very rugged construction, it's going to be a no-brainer. I think this is an excellent duty goggle for you guys and what you do. Sometimes great things are just simple things done right. And in my opinion, Steele has really knocked it out of the park with the Nighthawk. Thanks for watching, everybody. You can find all this and more at coldharborsupply.com, and we will catch you on the next one.